Reborn. I canceled the shared bus booking. The team reached the finals after the gates closed. The first thing I heard when I opened my eyes was the hiss of the campus radiator and the sharp click of Naomi Vale's pen. "You're paying the deposit tonight, right?" she asked. For 3 full seconds, I could not breathe. Naomi sat across from me in the engineering library, exactly as she had 2 years earlier, with her silver laptop open, her competition blazer draped over the chair, and the National Robotics Finals itinerary glowing on the screen between us. Behind her, rain crawled down the black windows. On the table lay a yellow sticky note in my handwriting. Shared bus. 40 seats. Friday, 4:30 a.m. Campus, Eastgate. My fingers went cold. I had died on a Tuesday. Not dramatically. There had been no screeching tires, no mysterious gunshot, no final confession in the rain. I had collapsed in a supermarket aisle at 29 after years of working 2 jobs, paying off a debt that never should have been mine, and reading every new article about the people who had ruined me. Naomi Vale became the youngest director at Vale Dynamics. Team Captain Julian Cross hosted leadership seminars. Professor Halden received an award for mentoring disadvantaged students. And whenever anyone searched my name, the first result was still the same old headline: Student Sabotages National Final, Costs University $1 million sponsorship. Now I was 19 again. Now Naomi was tapping her pen, waiting for me to rescue her. "I asked if you're paying the deposit," she repeated. "The bus company needs it before midnight. You said your card limit was high enough." In my first life, I had smiled. I had paid the $1,800 deposit from the emergency account my mother left me. Julian promised the faculty would reimburse me after the finals. Naomi said she would submit the form. Professor Halden called me a lifesaver. 3 days later, they changed the pickup point without telling me, loaded the prototype before dawn, and left me standing alone at the East Gate. Then, the bus broke down 40 minutes from the venue. Julian told the judges I had selected an unreliable company without approval. Naomi produced an edited email showing that I had rejected a safer carrier to save money. Professor Halden confirmed that I had acted independently. They arrived after registration closed. I arrived even later, in a taxi I could barely afford, carrying the original booking records and believing the truth would save me. It did not. The university needed one person to blame. I was the scholarship student with no family, no lawyer, and no surname carved into the engineering building. This time, I looked at Naomi's pen and smiled. "No," I said. The pen stopped clicking. Naomi blinked. "No, what?" "I'm not paying the deposit." Her expression did not change immediately. That was one of Naomi's gifts. She could hear something she hated and hold her face perfectly still while deciding which version of herself would be most useful. Then she laughed. "Very funny, Mara. I'm serious." Julian looked up from the whiteboard at the end of the table. He had been pretending not to listen. In my first life, I mistook that habit for concentration. Later, I understood he listened to everything and acknowledged only what benefited him. "What's the problem?" he asked. "No problem." I closed the booking page on my laptop. "I'm canceling the reservation." The room went silent. Even the radiator seemed to pause. Julian walked toward me slowly. At 19, he already knew how to make concern sound like authority. "We leave in 4 days." "I know. The finals are 6 hours away." "I know that too. And the university vans are booked." "That sounds inconvenient." Naomi leaned forward. "Mara, you volunteered to handle transport." "I volunteered to compare options." "I found one." "Nobody approved the payment. Nobody transferred the money. Nobody signed the liability form. So I'm stepping back." Julian's jaw tightened. "We agreed as a team."
"No."
"You said, Mara can put on her card because she doesn't have rent this month." "That is not a team agreement." His eyes flicked toward Naomi. There it was. A tiny movement, barely anything. But I had spent 10 years replaying their lies, and I knew their silent language better than they did. Naomi's expression softened. "You know we'd reimburse you." "Great. Then one of you can pay." She sat back. Julian crossed his arms. This is about the presentation slot, isn't it? I almost laughed. In my first life, they had removed me from the stage 2 days before departure. I built the prototype's thermal regulator, wrote most of the control software, and designed the emergency override that made our machine competition legal. Still, Naomi said sponsors preferred a polished presenter. Julian said my accent sounded uncertain on camera. Professor Halden called it a strategic choice. I had swallowed my humiliation because I wanted the team to win. No, I said. The presentation slot is your problem. The bus is also your problem. Naomi's voice sharpened. You're being emotional. That sentence had controlled me for years. Any time I objected, I was emotional. Any time Julian shouted, he was under pressure. Any time Naomi cried, she was overwhelmed. Any time I produced evidence, I was obsessed. I stood and slid my laptop into my bag. Then it should be a relief that I'm removing my emotions from the booking. Julian stepped into my path. Don't cancel anything until we talk to Professor Halden. I looked up at him. In my first life, that face had appeared above me during the disciplinary hearing. He had worn a navy tie and said, Mara always struggled with accountability. Now he was 19, handsome, confident, and still convinced that the world would arrange itself around his needs. It's already cancelled, I said. That was not technically true. Not yet. But while Naomi had been asking about the deposit, I had opened the cancellation tab beneath the table. My cursor hovered over the final button. Julian stared at me. I pressed confirm. My phone vibrated. Reservation cancelled. Deposit not charged. Naomi lunged for my screen. Are you insane? I stepped back before she could touch me. The old Mara would have apologized. The old Mara would have explained. The old Mara would have offered to fix everything before anyone could punish her. I felt that reflex rise inside me like a hand reaching for a familiar wound. Then I let it fall. You have 4 days, I said. I'm sure the youngest future director at Veil Dynamics can book a bus. Naomi's face lost its softness. For the first time in both my lives, she looked at me without pretending to like me. You'll regret this, she said. I believed her. But regret was not the same as fear. I had already lived through the worst thing they could do to me. This time, I intended to watch them do it to themselves. I left the library at 8:17 p.m. Rain struck the stone courtyard hard enough to blur the lamps. My body remembered this night even when my mind did not. I knew the vending machine near the stairwell would jam. I knew the security guard would drop his keys beside the revolving door. I knew my phone would ring before I reached the bus stop. It rang. Professor Halden. I watched his name glow against the dark screen. In my first life, I answered every call immediately. This time, I let it ring 6 times. Then I picked up. Mara. His voice carried the heavy disappointment of a man who believed disappointment was a weapon. I've just heard something troubling. That was fast. Did you cancel the team's transport? I canceled a reservation in my name that required my personal credit card. You made a commitment. So did the university. I'm still waiting for written reimbursement approval. He exhaled slowly. This is not how professionals behave. I stopped beneath the covered walkway. Beyond the glass, rainwater streamed along the curb where, for days from now, I had once waited for a bus that never came. Professionals don't pressure students to front $1,800 without paperwork, I said. Silence. Professor Halden disliked precise language. Precision left fewer places for him to hide. We can discuss the financial details tomorrow, he said. For now, restore the booking. I can't. Why not? The company released the bus. That part was true. The cancellation email said the vehicle would immediately return to inventory. His voice dropped. You are jeopardizing years of work.
No, professor.
I stopped financing it. Mara, listen carefully. You are part of this team because I advocated for you. Do not confuse opportunity with entitlement. There it was. The sentence beneath every favor he had ever offered me. You belong here because I allow it. In my first life, Those words would have crushed me. Now they only clarified the battlefield. I'll remember that, I said. He mistook my calm for surrender.
Good.
Be in my office at 8 tomorrow. We'll resolve this before it becomes embarrassing. It already is embarrassing. For whom? I looked across the courtyard at the engineering building named after Naomi's grandfather. That depends on who keeps the records, I said, and ended the call. My hands trembled afterward. Rebirth had not erased fear. It had only returned me to the moment before fear became obedience. I stood under the walkway until the shaking passed. Then I opened my email and forwarded every message about the bus, the reimbursement, the presentation change, and the prototype ownership to a new private account. Next, I photographed the lab notebook in my bag. Every page, every date, every equation, every signature. Finally, I sent one message to someone I had not spoken to in my first life until it was too late. Dr. Sarah Bennett, the competition's independent technical auditor. My message contained only 12 words. I need advice about authorship, safety compliance, and possible retaliation. Her reply arrived before the next bus. Come at 7 tomorrow morning. Bring everything. For the first time since waking, I smiled without forcing it. The finals were 4 days away. The gates had not closed yet. At 6:52 the next morning, I stood outside Dr. Bennett's office holding 2 coffees and the evidence of my own erasure. Her door opened before I knocked. You're early, she said. So are you. I'm always early when a student uses the words safety compliance and retaliation in the same sentence. Dr. Bennett was younger than I remembered, perhaps 36, with tightly braided hair and a red fountain pen clipped to her collar. In my first life, I met her after the disciplinary hearing. She had asked why my name was missing from the design history. I had been too frightened, too exhausted, and too convinced that authority figures protected one another to answer honestly. 6 months later, she resigned from the competition board and published an article about institutional coercion. By then, my scholarship was gone. I followed her inside. She did not touch the coffee. Start with the safety issue. Not the bus. Not the arguments. Not my hurt feelings. The safety issue. I opened my lab notebook to the thermal regulator calculations. Our battery array overheated during the regional trial. I designed a bypass and wrote the shutdown protocol. The current competition file lists Julian as the system architect and Naomi as compliance lead. My name appears under assembly support. Did you consent to that description?
No.
Did you sign the final safety declaration? I signed a draft 3 weeks ago. The design changed afterward. Her eyes lifted.
How?
I showed her the photograph I had taken inside the prototype casing. Julian had replaced my ceramic insulation with a lighter polymer sleeve to improve speed. The sleeve's manufacturer rated it for temperatures 20 degrees below our maximum fault condition. Dr. Bennett stopped writing. Who approved this? Julian says Professor Halden did. Professor Halden says Naomi's father supplied the material. Nobody has shown me a revised test report. And the machine is traveling Friday? That's the plan. She turned the notebook toward herself. Your transport complaint is separate. It is, but they'll connect them. I canceled a bus reservation that required my personal card. They'll say I raised the safety concern because I'm angry about being removed from the presentation. Are you angry? Yes. Her mouth moved slightly, almost a smile. Good answer. I blinked. Anger doesn't invalidate evidence, she said. People who benefit from your silence will insist that it does. Never help them by pretending you feel nothing. That sentence settled somewhere deep inside me. She copied 3 pages, scanned the emails, and asked me to write a formal chronology. Then she did something nobody had done in my first life. She told me exactly what would happen next. I will notify the competition safety panel that your declaration may no longer match the submitted device. I will not make an accusation of misconduct yet. The panel will request the revision history. If your team produces valid testing, the concern ends. If they cannot, the machine will be quarantined until inspection. They'll know it was me. Probably. They'll remove me from the team. Possibly. I could lose my scholarship. Not lawfully for reporting a safety concern, but people do unlawful things with impressive confidence. She capped her pen. So, we document everything. I looked at the untouched coffee beside her hand. Why are you helping me? Because this is my job. The answer was so simple that it hurt. At 7:46, my phone began vibrating across her desk. Julian, Naomi, Professor Halden, Julian again. A team group chat exploded with messages. Bus canceled? Who has a company account? All charters sold out Friday. Can we take the train? Prototype doesn't fit baggage limit. Naomi tagged me 7 times. Dr. Bennett glanced at the screen. Do you need to answer?
No.
Then don't. That was another revelation. A ringing phone was not a command. When I finally left her office, Julian was waiting in the corridor. He had not slept. His hair was uncombed, his shirt collar bent, and the controlled concern from last night had burned away. What did you send her? He demanded. I kept walking. He moved beside me. Mara, I have class. You met with the national auditor before speaking to Professor Halden. Yes. Do you understand how disloyal that looks? I stopped so suddenly he took another step before turning back. Disloyal to whom? I asked. The team. I built the shutdown system. You replaced its insulation and removed my authorship. Explain which part of that deserves loyalty. His face changed. Not guilt. Calculation. You photographed the casing. It was not a question. I felt a pulse of triumph. He had just confirmed he knew the change was hidden. I document my work, I said. We were going to tell you after testing. What testing? The private test at Veil Dynamics. When? He hesitated. There had been no test. I stepped closer. You submitted the compliance packet Monday. The material changed Sunday. Naomi's father sent the sleeve Saturday. So tell me, Julian, when did you complete a 48-hour heat cycle test? His eyes hardened. You think you're the only person who understands a machine.
No.
I think I'm the only person in this hallway who read the manufacturer's limit. You're trying to destroy us because you lost a speaking role. Say that louder. What? Dr. Bennett's door is still open. He glanced behind me. The red drained from his face. I walked away. At 8, Professor Halden's office contained 6 people and 1 empty chair positioned in the center, like an interrogation lamp. Naomi sat beside her father's attorney. That was new. In my first life, they had not brought lawyers until after the finals. My early report had changed their timing. Professor Halden gestured toward the empty chair. Sit down, Mara. I remained standing. Is this a disciplinary meeting? His brows rose. It's a team discussion. Then why is Mr. Vale's corporate counsel here? The attorney smiled without warmth. I advise the company supplying components. Then this concerns liability. Naomi snapped. Can you stop performing for 5 minutes? I looked at her. She was dressed perfectly, but a vein pulsed beneath the makeup at her temple. Professor Halden folded his hands. We have 2 urgent problems. First, you canceled essential transport without team authorization. Second, you reported an internal design matter externally, potentially damaging our sponsor relationship. I canceled my own reservation before payment. I reported an undocumented safety modification to the designated auditor. You could have come to me. I did, last Friday. You said the sleeve was probably fine and asked me not to create drama before nationals. The faculty administrator near the window looked up sharply. Professor Halden's expression stayed smooth. I don't recall that conversation. I took out my phone. Naomi laughed. What? Did you secretly record him?
No.
I emailed myself a summary 12 minutes afterward and copied the lab account. The message includes the temperature rating, your father's shipment number, and Professor Halden's instruction to postpone discussion. The attorney stopped smiling. Pattern interruption. In my first life, I brought memories to a paperwork fight. This time, I brought paperwork. Professor Halden reached for the printed email I placed on his desk, but the administrator took it first. Why wasn't this entered into the project risk register? She asked. Naomi answered too quickly. Because Mara exaggerated the risk. Then where is the test disproving it? Silence. Julian stared at the floor. Professor Halden cleared his throat. The testing file is being compiled. The machine is scheduled to leave in 72 hours, the administrator said. It will be complete. I knew that tone. He was promising an outcome he expected somebody else to manufacture. The attorney leaned toward Naomi and whispered. She nodded, then looked at me with sudden sadness. Mara, nobody wants conflict, she said. We're all tired. Let's fix the transportation first, and then we can review the credit allocation after nationals. There it was, the gentle version of the trap. Restore the bus. Save the team. Delay the evidence. Reach the finals. Then discover that every promise had vanished. What solution are you proposing? I asked. Relief flashed across Julian's face. Naomi opened a booking website. The original company still has a coach available Thursday night. It costs more, but if you call and explain the cancellation was accidental, they might honor the old rate. Why would I call? Because you made the reservation. And you want me to make another one? Professor Halden's patience cracked. Yes, Mara. That is the obvious remedy. Using whose card? Nobody answered. I waited. The clock on his wall ticked 8 times. Finally, the attorney said, Veil Dynamics can provide a reimbursement guarantee. Before or after I pay? After the invoice is processed.
No.
Naomi slapped her palm against the desk. You have the money. The room froze. She realized too late what she had revealed. Not that I could afford the deposit. That she knew exactly where the money came from. I turned to her. How do you know what I have? Her lips parted. In my first life, I had once shown her my banking app when she helped me apply for a rental. She had seen the emergency account my mother created before she died. I had forgotten. Naomi had not.
You told me, she said.
I told you it was my mother's life insurance money. It's sitting there. The words left her mouth with naked contempt. To Naomi, unused money did not belong to the person protecting it. It belonged to the most important crisis in the room, and her crises were always important. I picked up my bag. Professor Halden stood. This meeting is not over. For me, it is. You walk out now, and I will reconsider your place on the team. I turned to the door. My name is missing from the official design file, my presentation role was reassigned, and my safety approval was used after the design changed. Exactly what place am I losing? Nobody had an answer. So I left them with the empty chair. At 9:13, the competition panel froze our machine certification. At 9:20, Naomi removed me from the team group chat. At 9:24, Julian revoked my lab access. At 9:31, I received an email stating that my participation in the national finals was suspended pending a professionalism review. The old Mara would have broken. I sat on a bench outside the mechanics building, read the message twice, and allowed myself exactly 1 minute to feel the loss. 58 seconds in, someone sat beside me. Please tell me you backed up the control code, said Priya Nand. I turned. Priya was captain of our university's second robotics team, the one everyone called the basement crew because their lab had no windows and half their parts came from discarded appliances. In my first life, her team withdrew before nationals after their navigation lead broke his wrist. I had barely known her then. Now she held out a paper cup of terrible vending machine tea. I backed up my code, I said carefully. Good. Why? Because our programmer is in surgery, we have an open roster slot, and Dr. Bennett just confirmed that your suspension applies to Halden's team, not the university delegation.
Ist sehr her.
Priya grinned. Also, she said, we booked train tickets 3 months ago. Priya did not ask whether I wanted revenge. She asked whether I could make their steering algorithm stop confusing polished floors with open space. That was why I trusted her. We went directly to the basement crew's lab. It smelled of solder, instant noodles, and damp concrete. Their robot, Patchwork stood on a workbench with one wheel from a hospital trolley, a camera mount cut from an old desk lamp, and a bright orange emergency button the size of my fist. It's ugly, Priya said proudly, but every component has a test certificate. I circled the machine. Your weight distribution is terrible. Also certified. For the first time since waking in the past, I laughed. The team consisted of Priya, mechanical lead Ben Okafor, electronics specialist Lucy Tran, and navigation programmer Tomas Illich, who was currently waiting for surgery after falling from a climbing wall. Their regional score had been lower than ours, but their reliability score was the highest in the competition. They had qualified as the university's reserve delegation because 3 international teams withdrew. They did not need my regulator design. They did not want Vale's sponsor money. They needed someone who understood autonomous routing and could present under pressure. I thought you hated presenting, Lucy said. I hate being told my voice is unsuitable after I write the presentation. That sounds different. It is. Priya placed a roster amendment in front of me. My role was listed as control systems and co-presenter. Beside it was a blank line for my signature.
No hidden clause.
No promise to fix the credit later. No request for my card. I signed. Then the lab door opened. Julian stood there with a security officer. His gaze moved from me to Patchwork, then to the roster form beneath my hand. You can't be serious. Priya leaned against the workbench. We're usually not, but the form is. The security officer cleared his throat. Mara, Professor Halden reported that you may possess proprietary project files belonging to the primary team. I had expected this. In my first life, I learned too late that accusations moved faster than explanations because institutions treated suspicion as urgency and truth as paperwork. I handed him a sealed envelope. What's this? A list of every file on my personal devices, their creation dates, and their repository ownership. I also included the university's intellectual property policy and my employment status. I was an unpaid student researcher. The code modules I wrote are time-stamped under my account. Copies are already with student legal services. Julian's mouth tightened. You planned this.
No.
I survived it before. The words escaped before I could stop them. Priya looked at me strangely, but Julian was too angry to notice.
He pointed at my laptop.
She has our final control architecture. Our final architecture? I asked. The submission says you designed it. His hand dropped. Pattern interruption. Every lie creates a door that only opens one way. If the code was mine, their authorship declaration was false. If it was theirs, I could not be stealing it by retaining my own development history. The security officer read the first page of my inventory, then looked at Julian. Do you have a specific file name or repository claim? Julian hesitated. Professor Halden has the details. Then he can submit them. The officer left without touching my laptop. Julian remained in the doorway. You think joining them makes you safe? He said quietly. Ben stood from his stool. He was nearly a head taller than Julian. Priya raised one hand. No threats in the basement. The ventilation is already bad. Julian ignored her. When we win, nobody will remember who wrote a few lines of code. I looked at the machine he had come to defend without checking whether it might catch fire. Then you have nothing to worry about, I said. He left. The next 30 hours disappeared into work. Patchwork's navigation problem was not one problem. It was 4 small errors pretending to be a personality. The camera overexposed reflective flooring. The wheel encoders drifted after sharp turns. The obstacle map retained objects 2 seconds too long. Worst of all, Tomas had inserted a confidence threshold that forced the robot to stop whenever sensor readings disagreed, which happened constantly under bright lights. I did not replace his system. I called him from the hospital. He answered wearing a gown and looking furious at gravity. Do not rewrite my localization stack, he said before saying hello. I won't. Explain why the confidence threshold is global. Because Priya changes hardware every Tuesday. It was 1 motor, Priya shouted from behind me. It was 3 motors pretending to be 1. We argued for 40 minutes, then built a layered threshold that let Patchwork slow down instead of freezing. Lucy adjusted the camera exposure, then shifted the battery 2 centimeters backward. Priya ran test courses and yelled insults at the robot whenever it clipped a cone. At midnight, Patchwork completed the course cleanly. Nobody claimed sole credit. Nobody called me a lifesaver. Priya simply wrote each change, each author, and each test result into the log. I had never understood how peaceful fairness could feel. At 12:23 a.m., Naomi sent me a private message. We found transport. You can stop trying to scare everyone. Attached was a photograph of a white coach outside the engineering building. The company logo read Northline Executive Travel. My stomach tightened. I knew that bus. In my first life, Northline was the original carrier. The one I had booked. The one that broke down. But something was wrong. I opened the old cancellation email and compared the registration number. Different vehicle. Then I zoomed in on the photograph. A temporary permit was taped inside the windscreen. The coach was not part of Northline's regular fleet. It had been subcontracted from a regional operator after Naomi offered triple the normal rate. I searched the transport regulator's public database. The permit allowed passenger service, but not the cargo trailer visible behind the bus. A heavy prototype trailer required an additional endorsement. I could have reported it. My finger hovered over the regulator's complaint page. Then I stopped. Was I protecting people or arranging their punishment? The answer mattered. The prototype would be secured in a rated transport case. The trailer paperwork was Naomi's responsibility. Unlike the insulation sleeve, the issue did not present an immediate danger I could verify. Reporting it at midnight based on a photograph would look exactly like the retaliation they accused me of. So I closed the page. Revenge was not doing everything possible to hurt them. Revenge was refusing to save them from the consequences they selected themselves. I replied with 4 words. Glad you solved it. Naomi immediately began typing. The dots appeared, disappeared, and returned. You should know we voted to remove your name from the team patent application. I read the message twice. Then I forwarded it to Student Legal Services. Thank you, I wrote. For what? For putting that in writing. The typing dots vanished. Friday arrived under a sky the color of wet cement. The national finals registration gate would open at 7 a.m. Saturday and close at 8:30. No late admission. The rule appeared 14 times in the competition handbook because the venue shared a secure research campus. Teams had to unload, clear vehicle inspection, verify identity, and seal communication devices before entering. Priya's team boarded the 6:10 p.m. train with Patchwork packed into 2 approved cases. We had reserved seats, printed tickets, backup tickets on 3 phones, and a paper folder Lucy guarded like a sacred object. At 6:04, I received a photograph from a first-year student on Halden's team. Their coach was still empty. Professor says departure moved to 7 because Vale Media crew is late. I stared at the message. In my first life, the bus had been scheduled for 4:30 a.m. Friday. They had secretly moved pickup to 4 o'clock at the West Gate so the sponsor could film a sunrise departure. This time, because they found an overnight coach, Naomi had delayed it for another promotional shoot. 6 hours to the city. Address stops, unloading, and security. They had almost no margin. I typed, "Tell them to leave now." Then I deleted it. The student was not responsible for their arrogance, but warning him would change nothing. He had no authority. Julian would call him dramatic. Naomi would say the driver promised to make up time. Instead, I wrote, "Keep your own identification and medication with you, not under the bus." He sent a thumbs up. Our train left exactly on time. As campus lights slid behind us, Priya handed me a sandwich. "You look like you're attending a funeral," she said. Maybe I am. For whom? The version of me who would still be standing at the East Gate. She waited, giving me room to explain. I did not. Not yet. Outside, rain streaked the windows into silver lines. Inside, Ben played cards with Lucy. Patchwork's cases rested safely in the luggage rack, and nobody expected me to carry the entire journey on my back. At 8:11, Naomi posted a departure video. The coach rolled through fake smoke while Julian waved beside the prototype trailer. Professor Halden stood in front of the camera praising preparation, resilience, and shared responsibility. Priya watched over my shoulder. "Shared responsibility," she said. "Did the smoke machine pay the deposit?" I laughed so loudly that the woman across the aisle glared at us. At 10:36, the first message arrived. Traffic stopped near Bellwether Pass. Driver says 20 minutes. At 11:18, still stopped. At 12:07, moving now but slowly. At 1:42, driver taking mandatory break. Julian arguing. At 2:03, Naomi says arrival 7:40. At 3:15, trailer light fault. Police inspection. Each update came from the same first-year student. I never asked for them. I think he needed one person outside the bus to know what was happening. Our train reached the city at 12:40. We checked into a budget hotel across from the research campus. At 6:15, after 4 hours of sleep, we wheeled Patchwork toward the registration gate beneath clear morning skies. At 6:58, we were third in line. At 7:12, our documents were approved. At 7:26, Patchwork passed inspection. At 7:31, I stepped through the gate. Only then did I check my phone. Naomi's bus was 90 kilometers away. At 7:45, the first elimination briefing began. At 8:02, the student messaged that the driver had left the motorway. At 8:17, he sent a photograph through the coach windscreen. The research campus towers were visible beyond a line of morning traffic. Naomi began calling me at 8:21. I declined once. She called again. Priya looked over from the equipment table. "Answer it. You'll keep staring otherwise." I stepped into the corridor and pressed accept. "Mara, tell registration we're at the south entrance," Naomi said without greeting. Wind and shouting roared behind her. "They're directing the bus around the campus because of the trailer. Go to Dr. Bennett. Tell her to hold the gate. The gate closes at 8:30. I know what the rule says." "Then you know I can't change it. You caused this." For a moment, the old accusation struck with full force. My chest tightened. I saw the disciplinary room from my first life, the newspaper headline, the supermarket aisle where my second chance had begun. Then I looked through the glass at Patchwork, surrounded by people who had checked their own tickets, signed their own forms, and arrived under their own power. "I canceled an unpaid reservation 4 days ago," I said. "You hired this coach, chose the departure time, attached the trailer, and delayed for a media shoot. We would have had the original bus if you hadn't thrown a tantrum. The original bus was released. You booked another vehicle from the same company. That was your decision." Her voice broke into something raw. "Just tell them we're here. I'm sure they can see the bus." A horn sounded behind her. Then Julian took the phone. "Mara, listen. If we miss registration, Halden will report that you deliberately interfered with university travel. Help us now, and we'll restore your patent credit." I almost admired the efficiency of it. Threat, bargain, stolen property offered as mercy. "No," I said. "You're destroying your own career. That prediction already failed once." "What does that mean?" The public address system chimed above me. "Attention! National finalist registration will close in 5 minutes." Julian heard it. His breathing changed. "Mara." I ended the call. At 8:29, security staff drew the barrier across the vehicle entrance. At 8:30, the electronic credentials portal locked. At 8:41, a white coach appeared beyond the south fence, dragging a prototype trailer beneath an enormous Veil Dynamics banner. The team had reached the finals. The gates were already closed. They poured onto the pavement in matching blazers. Naomi ran first, waving a folder above her head. Julian followed, shouting that they were registered competitors. Professor Halden pushed past the driver and demanded a supervisor. None of it mattered. The security officers did not know Naomi's father. The scanner did not care about Julian's leadership awards. The gate had one rule, one timestamp, and no interest in potential. A veil cameraman filmed everything until the attorney slapped his lens downward. From inside the fence, I watched Professor Halden point toward me. Even at that distance, I knew exactly what he was saying. Her fault. Dr. Bennett arrived beside the gate carrying her red pen and the competition handbook. She listened for less than a minute. Then she requested their transport confirmation. Naomi handed over the booking. Dr. Bennett read the timestamp. Thursday, 2:14 p.m. More than 2 days after I canceled mine. She looked toward me once, not for permission, only confirmation that I was present. Then she returned the papers. Your team independently contracted this carrier and selected its schedule, she said. Ms. Ellison had no role in this journey. Professor Halden's arm dropped. The sentence crossed the fence more cleanly than any victory speech. No role in this journey. At last, their disaster belonged entirely to them. Security escorted the coach to a holding area. The first-year student caught my eye through the fence. I raised my hand. He looked miserable, but safe. Later, I would send him my notes and help him transfer to Priya's lab. For now, the opening round was called. Patchwork performed badly for the first 30 seconds. It swerved at the first reflective panel, corrected too far, and bumped a boundary rail. My stomach dropped. Across the arena, Priya whispered, "Ugly is part of the strategy." Then the layered threshold activated. Patchwork slowed, recalibrated, and moved. It navigated the warehouse maze without another collision. It identified the simulated chemical leak, carried 2 supply canisters, and used its oversized orange button to trigger the emergency station with such force that the audience laughed. We qualified 5th. In the semi-final, a cable loosened inside the camera mount. Lucy spotted the flicker. Ben had 90 seconds to open the casing. Priya read the checklist aloud while I prepared a fallback route. Nobody blamed anyone. Nobody hid the fault. We fixed it with 11 seconds remaining and qualified 2nd. Before the final, Naomi found me near the washrooms. Her blazer was creased. Mascara shadowed the skin beneath her eyes. Without the gate, the cameras, and the people who normally arrange themselves around her, she looked younger than I felt. My father is withdrawing the sponsorship, she said. That's his decision. Halden says the university will blame you for creating instability. Student Legal Services has the records. You planned every part of this. No, I met her gaze. I plan my own protection. You plan the rest. She flinched. For 1 second, I thought she might apologize. Instead, she said, "You could have warned us about the driver's break." There it was. Even now, rescue was my unpaid responsibility. I could have booked the bus too, I said. I could have paid for it, checked the permits, loaded the equipment, set the alarms, called everyone, and taken the blame when something failed. That is the only version of me you ever valued. Naomi's mouth trembled. We were your friends.
No.
I was your infrastructure. The final call sounded. I walked away before she found another word to make her needs sound like love. The championship course was designed to punish speed. Robots had to cross unstable flooring, interpret changing signs, and choose between a short hazardous route and a longer safe one. Julian's machine would have taken the short route. I knew because I had written its original decision tree. Patchwork chose the long route. Halfway through, the judges introduced a surprise obstacle, a fallen beam that blocked our mapped corridor. The arena screen flashed 15 seconds to decide. My first instinct was to override the robot. Then I saw the confidence values stabilize. Trust it, Tomas said through the team headset from his hospital bed.
So I did.
Patchwork reversed, scanned the reflective floor, and built a new route around the beam. It crossed the finish line with only 4 seconds remaining. We did not know we had won until Priya screamed. The scoreboard placed basement crew first in reliability, first in safety response, and second in raw speed. Combined score. National champions.
Ben lifted Priya.
Lucy threw her checklist into the air. Tomas shouted through the tablets so loudly that a nurse appeared behind him. I stood still. The arena blurred. In my first life, I believed winning would have saved me. That belief kept me useful to people who never intended to let me stand on the stage. Now, when the announcer called my name as control systems engineer and co-presenter, the victory felt different. It was not proof that I deserved dignity. I had deserved it before the scoreboard changed. On Monday, the university opened an external investigation. The revision history showed that Julian had uploaded my regulator code under his account. Naomi had signed a test declaration for a heat cycle that never occurred. Professor Halden had forwarded my draft signature as though it approved the modified design. Julian lost his captaincy. Naomi's patent application was frozen. Professor Halden took leave and never returned to teaching. None of that restored my first life. Justice is not time travel, even when time travel gives you the chance to seek it. 3 weeks later, I stood at the campus east gate while rains silvered the road. The place looked smaller than the memory that had haunted me for 10 years. Priya pulled up in a dented hatchback with Patchwork's orange button visible through the rear window. "Are you getting in?" she called. "Who booked this transport?" "I did." "Who paid?" "I did." "Do you have insurance?" She held up a folder. Lucy made 3 copies. I opened the passenger door. As we drove away, my phone displayed one final message from Naomi. "Do you regret canceling the bus?" I watched the engineering building disappear behind the rain. Then I typed the truth.
No.
I regret how long I believed carrying everyone was the price of belonging. I sent it, blocked her number, and faced the road ahead. This time, I was not waiting at the wrong gate. 1 year later, Patchwork stood inside a glass case at the Student Innovation Center, still crooked, still patched, still wearing that ridiculous orange button. The plaque listed every contributor. My name was neither first nor smallest. It was simply there, accurate and permanent. New students sometimes asked about the national final. Priya always told them we won because our robot knew when to slow down. I told them we won because our team knew when to listen. Neither answer was complete. We won long before the scoreboard. On the morning each person carried their own responsibility. On the anniversary of the canceled booking, I received an automated email from Northline offering a loyalty discount. I stared at it, laughed, and deleted it. Then I opened the travel plan for our first international competition. Every ticket had an owner. Every payment had approval. Every risk had a name beside it. At the bottom, Priya had added one final note. "Mara is not responsible for saving everyone." I added a line beneath hers. "Neither is anyone else. That is why we work together." Then I clicked submit again.